Awesome. Oh, of course the music keeps playing. Of course it does. No, music, you can go away. Happy Friday, everybody. Hopefully it's a fast, furious Friday for you folks. Today's awesome broadcast is a little getting creative with, and of course the background. There we go. Let's see, where is the, there we go. We're getting creative. We're not saying just getting creative with dramatic tasks. And Mike Barbeau was going to be with us and lead the whole thing, and then he took the show. So we're going to throw Mike under the bus, and we're going to improvise a little on getting improvised with fun with dramatic tasks. I do like, however, though, if you guys notice the little background thing, which is just a little piece of stock art. There's like in the clouds. There's definitely a little mermaid flounder who looks like he's being tortured to death by like Cthulhu. So that's part of our getting creative, is torturing your favorite Disney icons with death from the old gods. Besides that, how's everybody doing this Friday? Not like we've got a Kickstarter going on or anything like that.
Some of us are exhausted.
Right, yeah, but here's the positive thing, right? Because to me, like, the whole point of these getting creative things are you are in a game session, something comes up, as long, like, if the adventure says do a dramatic task here and here's the tokens and the whatever, you don't have to think about it. It's right there. What these are for is this came up in a game session. The characters did a thing that I wasn't expecting. This feels like the right way to do it, but now I've got to figure out some numbers, like, on the fly. I need to get creative quick. And part of what we want to do on these is talk about, here are the levers that you're moving. Here are why we make some of these choices that we make. And so I think that actually works well with our theme. This is going to be just as instructive as doing something pre-prepared.
Nice. So before we get into it, Donald, how is the Kickstarter doing? Have we looked in the last 5 minutes? I think we've opened a bunch of stretch goals and.
Yeah, we're closing in. We're $2,300 from our $180,000 stretch goal, which is where we unlock the final component of the player's box, which is the player status cards. So it's an extra set of status cards that go with each player's box. So the things that I as a player need to keep in mind, and these are effects that I will cause my character to get in and out of, they go in the player's box, and you can always have your own set, so you're not fighting with the other players.
That is awesome. So yeah, wow, almost 1,800 backers. That is fantastic. Some cool the add-ons, and like the player's box has gotten to be a pretty beefy kind of inclusion. It's included in
it's like way too beefy. If you ask us, like, oh my god, we went a little too far with that. It's great.
Right. I mean, I think if you want to have all of your edge cards boxed, I think you need to pick up at least 2 extra boxes. Like they're probably big right now.
We had a debate about how to do with that. Yeah.
It depends on if you want them sleeved or not, right? So I do want to clarify something. The edge cards go with the player's box, but they're not part of the player's box. If you get another player's box, you're not getting all like 300 plus edge cards that we've unlocked again. That's the individual edge cards add-ons. The player's box comes with the box itself. It comes with the fold-out combat options. It comes with the little player's journal for taking notes, writing quotes, things like that. The card stand, and then in about $2,300 worth, the set of status cards.
Right.
That is pretty awesome.
So the rough math. Well, so I know exactly how many card sleeves you need if you back the campaign, and you want to sleeve every single edge card that's in the campaign. It's 6 sets of card sleeves, and that'll get you all of them, because you need 6 extras plus the one you get for free for backing at a print tier, and that will get you all of your edge cards.
This is like almost 400 cards, right?
Close to that. I don't remember the number off the top of my head anymore. I remember that yesterday, not today.
It's a lot of cards.
Yeah, it is.
We love it.
And then this is, if you want to have all of those sleeved cards in the boxes, you want about 4 card boxes, because that will be enough to hold all of the sleeved cards. I think if you go with unsleeved cards, you can get away with 3.
Nice. Oh, yeah. We haven't had the graphics make it clear. It's just how many edge cards you guys get. So the.
It does say in the text of the add-ons, though.
Oh no, yeah. There's no graphics. There's just visualizing how many cards. Because these aren't regular. These are the oversized 3.5 inch by 5. And so
Yep.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's 148 from Suede, 93 from Deadlands, and then if you're in the 20th anniversary celebration tier, you get 123 from the Fantasy Companion for just included. Other pledge tiers, you have to add that on because it's 123 cards.
Yeah, and folks are just getting their Fantasy Companions. First wave of shipping is coming through, so we're glad to see you guys post your pictures of your Fantasy Companion arriving and the unboxings. Those are great. So we're pleased you guys are getting those. So if you back that campaign, you might want to pick up the Fantasy Edge cards in this campaign as an add-on, or just go in for the full 150 top tier, and they're included for free. So yeah, that value of that top tier is pretty good now too. But let's see, any other stretch goals? Yeah, I think that you mentioned this is the last stretch goal. We toil over these stretch goals. Like the people have loved the shoulder bag. A lot of people have done that as an add-on, and then like the extra shells over it. But I think, is it the players cards, the last one? So we're going to have to spend the weekend figuring out what are we going to announce for like 200 or after 200. So you guys keep us working. It's no rest for the wicked or the weary. But we appreciate you guys spreading the word on the campaign. It's gone fantastic. I'll pop a link here in the chat in about 2 seconds if you haven't checked out the campaign. But the coolest thing about the campaign is we're doing players books. They are soft cover. There's 5 variant covers. You can pick which cover you want, or you can get, if you're a game master who wants a bunch for your table, we have a tier that you can get 5 copies. You can even add on more. I think hopefully early as next week we'll be able to show you what the mystery variant cover is, and we are also doing a 5th printing special commemorative 20th anniversary edition of Suede, and we've got some cool announcements coming out soon about that. We're definitely zhuzhing it up compared to what we've shown you so far. So for folks who are in on that, that would be a real special commemorative item. We've listened to your feedback, and we also got some quotes from our printer on can you do this for us? And another cool thing that we just found out from our printer, this has kind of been with the global shipping crisis and timelines, we will be able to get 5th printing of Suede regular books that look just like this. So none of the commemorative, none of the foiling or all the other cool things we're doing for the 5th printing in this campaign. We will be able to get those in sooner than we had planned earlier. So we'll have an announcement coming out soon on just what those timelines are. So if you just need an updated version with all of the updates and aren't going in for the deluxe version, we'll let you know soon when those will be available. So keep on the lookout for that announcement. It'll be coming here soon. So I'll get you guys a link, and I'll get my screen off your screen so we can start talking about dramatic tasks. Boom. So who wants to start? Who's the Clint? I think have you been voluntold that we're gonna run with your scenario? Is that what's going on first?
Yeah, I can run that. I mean, we can start by talking about them in general a little bit, and then we can go into the kind of an example of how to do one. And one of the things I really like about them, which you'll discover when we get to that example, I am teasing.
So what are dramatic tasks? When do you use them? What role do they play in Savage Worlds?
Dramatic tasks are awesome when you want to insert tension into a scene that may not necessarily involve combat solely as effect. So to kind of talk about the dials that we have in Savage Worlds, you've got full-on combat, you've got chase scenes. And then on the other end, we've got quick encounters where we can resolve everything with one roll, which I believe we're going to be talking about next week. What a promo. But in between that, you've got dramatic tasks. And dramatic tasks can be used for so many things. And from the years I've seen them, many of the things that you see in other rules can be simulated with dramatic tasks. We've got the standard stuff we talked about, but you can run a chase as a dramatic task where you're using driving or piloting or things like that as your main roles, or other people are using, shooting. It could be a combat. Chases. You can run social dramatic tasks as opposed to social skills. Networking. Any other rule you see can theoretically be run as a dramatic task to give it a different sense of tension in how it happens. That's essentially one of the roles there. Now, the main ones we talk about, and you see in the thing, are, when you're dealing with maybe a natural disaster, or obviously we have to defuse a bomb. We've got to hack into a computer. We've got to do a lot of things that it's like, I want this to be more than a quick encounter or a single roll. I want there to be something, and give other people some chances to aid, but also to have that sense of drama that comes from not only needing multiple successes, but also, and this is a key component of dramatic task, using the action deck with the ways that can change what might happen.
Right. And yeah, and it's like story-wise, like where they come up for me a lot is in most other games, the interesting thing you interface with the rules, the part of the rules that have the depth are combat, right? So you find yourself as a GM to have a climactic moment in your game session pushing to have a combat of some kind, a combat encounter. So like as the story is going and your players are making these weird choices, they're like, oh yeah, we want to sneak out of the pirate fortress or whatever and get away. In most other games, you're like, well, you're going to bump into some guys, you're going to fight them, that's the climactic scene, and then you get away, because that's the only tool in my box is a hammer. So like we're just going to, hammer these nails, and that's how it's going to be. But with a dramatic task, you've got this other option, right? Like we can have a climactic confrontation of sneaking out of this place or doing this thing by rolling out the dramatic task. And if we win and succeed, it feels good. Like it still feels like that climactic, finale, even though we didn't strike a blow.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is really, that I think is important about dramatic tasks is the time element. So if there's a time element, if there's a pressure element, like I've got to defuse a bomb before it goes off, I've got to rescue people before the building burns down, I've got to do something before something happens, and either if I've got to chase somebody before they get away, and that's an example of using a dramatic task as a chase, right? There, I think, has to be a time element in the dramatic task so that there's pressure, because that's the whole construct of it. So many tokens in so many rounds, right? Once those rounds complete, you're done, whether you've succeeded or not. And that's an important element when you're setting them up and when you're deciding whether to use them or not.
Yeah, and if you're having a hard time figuring that out, that's your indication that, well, wait, maybe this wasn't a dramatic task after all.
Exactly.
Maybe I need to use a different tool from the box.
Could be quick encounters is good for something that isn't time-based, and also, social conflicts don't necessarily have to be time-based, and neither do mass battles, actually. But dramatic tasks almost always have to be, so I think that's very important to remember.
So how do action cards work in with dramatic tasks? Like we know how they work in regular combat. Like, how do jokers work? How do our club special? What are the kind of the card mechanics?
Yeah. Jokers work the same way. The main thing, it all works the same way with one new wrinkle, which is if you are Delta Club, you have a complication. Now, what that complication is varies narratively, based on the situation or whatever. But kind of whatever it is, you're -2 to your roll. And if you're like on the lead or in a multi-person task, like at all, if you fail on that club with that -2, the worst possible thing that can happen happens. So generally that means don't roll, unless you're really sure, because it's going to mess things up. And that's where that time factor really starts to push you.
Yeah. So if you decide not to roll, the time is still going. It's still ticking. Like that's a legitimate choice, but you're making a trade-off there. But go ahead, Don. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, and it's not that new of a concept if you've been using the other subsystems, right? If you've run a chase, complication is on a clubs and a chase. Likewise here in the dramatic task. So it's using all of the parts of the buffalo and the tools that you've already learned running the rest of the game here as well. So that way you don't have to, it's very intuitive. You can just kind of think about, okay, well, if I wanted to do this thing that we're about to do with the dramatic task, how could I do it? It's just formalized into a system.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the other important part about clubs, and this gets into the part where there is a little bit of a tactical choice here, is if you're making a support role to help someone else and you have a club, you still take that penalty, but the task doesn't automatically fail. What he said earlier was key of, if you're the lead or if you're in a multi-person task where you're rolling to get the tokens towards success. But if you choose just to make a support roll to help someone else, you'll be at -2 for your club, which it doesn't automatically fail. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, though, is if the person that's still in the lead has a club, you suffer the -2 for both. So you're at -4 on that to that roll. Yeah, that's a key little roll in there that sometimes people, misses. You can double up on that complication if you're trying to support someone who also has a club. But that's a key. But otherwise, I think one of the great things about dramatic tasks is it gives such narrative control for, give me the skills. Sometimes we say there's specific skills that work, but if a player comes up with a reasonable way they can use a skill in a dramatic task and describe how they think it might work, then you can use that skill,
Yeah. And if it's dicey, you can say, hey, people can use that as support for the main role, but the main role still needs to be this specific thing. But man, what you're talking about, that would work great as support. Like, that's not going to open the safe. However, Notice won't open the safe, but Notice could absolutely help find the tumblers and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, and I've had game masters use kind of an optional. It's not red, but not using the same skill twice. Or more than two at a time. You got to pick something else. A different way to narratively support. So it's not just find the thing I'm very, very bestest at all the time to support in the dramatic task. It's also kind of keeping in with the narrative of what's going on in the scene. So that's also a good way to spice it up. Yeah,
that's something that I see a lot, and I actually use, and that's one of those kind of GM dials and way to adjust dramatic tasks that there's so many things you can do. There's more than we could put in the book, really. But having that thing of alternate out skills, like don't just go to the same skill unless the GM says, hey, and I've run these before. Okay, this is something that can only be done with a cult. So you're going to have to roll a cult each time. But if it's something that's open to more skills, don't just press that I'm very attractive, I get +2 to persuasion button every round kind of thing,
Or do, because these can be hard. You're going to need your +2.
That's right.
Yeah.
As GM, you can take that into account when you decide how many tokens are required. And I will say, Erica mentioned running the dramatic task for a childbirth in an adventure. I played in that adventure, and it was very dramatic because one way or another, that child was going to be born. That was definitely something that was time constraint of making sure it happened right. And she did a very good thing, though, of acknowledging beforehand of this does not affect the quote unquote life of the child itself. That you're not dealing with that. It was really well done overall. But yes, I just want to let people know it was not a case that the child would not be born if you failed the dramatic task. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting part. Maybe one of you wants to talk about what is as a game master, how do you go about setting the expectations and what's at stake in the dramatic task to start with, right? So that's kind of a part of the thought process itself is, what not even just winning and losing, but what's at stake. What are the consequences of failure? Maybe if each of you want to talk about a little bit about how you approach that as kind of the first step in letting your players know what the consequences and what's really going on.
Yeah, and I think you set that up front, right? whatever you do, say it up front so people know what to commit.
Yeah,
come
my
up, Tracy,
thought
go.
is like with if you're doing a dramatic task and you're setting up this subsystem, it is important, like in the first place, that you have a failure condition, that there is a possibility of failure, and that you have a very good idea as the game master of what happens when they do fail. Because otherwise, it becomes like, well, you were supposed to succeed and now I don't have an idea, right? and you don't want that, because you number one, failure should be costly, but at the same time it shouldn't necessarily destroy the game, right? It shouldn't say that this is the end of the game once you fail the dramatic task, unless this happens to be the end of a one shot and it's a super horror-y one shot and it's okay for everybody to die at the end. That's a special condition, right?
Or you're a cruel bastard like me.
Yeah, or you're a cruel
We're
bastard
doing
like
this.
Derek.
Let's do it.
But I think there has to be condition for failure, and there has to be condition for success. In some cases, you could have partial success or partial failure as well, depending on how many task tokens you amount, right? So in some adventures I've written, I always write the fail condition. You have to write the fail condition, because that's what you're trying to avoid. And if people know it's there and know that something is going to happen, that gives them more juju to actually do it. And then having a partial condition in case you don't want to have full failure, or in case a GM wants to not go all the way to full failure, that's something that's nice to have. And then, of course, a victory condition, which most people will come up with, because that's the whole point of this. But I think you have to have them. And it doesn't necessarily have to end the game. In fact, it probably shouldn't end the game. It should just create complications for people to regroup and come back and do something different, right?
I generally like to have my consequences be to other people. So it's like, if you fail, it's someone else that's getting hosed. If you fail on clubs, you're going to get caught up in this too, right? But that's usually what I like to do. Because that sets people up. But as we said, it's based on the story. It's the narrative thing. Like if it's a bomb defusal, I can guess what happens on a failure.
3d6 or 5d6 damage, everybody.
Well, and that's another good point. So I break all the rules that Tracy and Daryl are talking about when it comes to dramatic tasks, because I will run a dramatic task where there is technically no end. It is until you get those number of successes, right? So for instance, I ran a playtest of Hollow's Last Hope back when we were doing Pathfinder, and one of the players was playing I was like, what do you do in this place, right? Why is Falcon's Hollow important to you? And it was like, I go and I'm a herbalist and I help people. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to do a dramatic task, and you need to get, I think it was like 5 tokens. And that's how quickly you're going to go from the place you're at to the place with somebody sick. And as many times as bad as it takes you to overcome what are the difficulties in the environment of this piece of travel, that's how many days it takes. And then on the back end, that's how many times I'm rolling for who in the list is dropping off from the disease in Falcon's Hollow. And, they didn't know, okay, are we 5 people away from one of the NPCs that I like getting killed? Are we 10? Right, but you can always customize, and it's a game like anything else. Yeah. You can ignore the bits that you don't need in the moment, which is I do all the time.
Yeah,
but there was time pressure there, right? Like literally, you can take as long as you want, but after 5 days, a bunch of people are dead. So
there's still time pressure there. Yeah.
So I have done in the duet games we've been doing. I have taken our dramatic tasks and I have spindled and mutilated them into doing so many different things. Mm-hmm. I did a semi combination of, we give an example in there of saving people from a fire. Every token is a person you save. That's a set condition.
Oh yeah.
I actually combined a combat with a dramatic task at one time, where every round in the midst of an actual combat, whatever skill they were rolling also counted towards the dramatic task, because at the same time, the allies were fighting a threat somewhere else. And as I informed Jody, who was my player, each one of those allies was going to be taking 4 wounds in that fight. And each token she got was 1 less wound in that battle that they would take along the way. And more to the point, I also set it up that she didn't get to choose who was going to be saved, that there was nothing there, that we randomly rolled where the successes would go to, and then they roll over to the next person on the list and things like that. So as it ended up, it's like 2 of the NPCs that were, probably the ones she would have saved first were the ones that were still looking at incapacitation at the end, because the more NPCs that allied NPCs that were involved in the battle meant the more successes that would be needed to get out of this. And in that case, I just used, the 5-round dramatic task, because essentially I felt the combat wouldn't go any longer than that anyway. Anything else did. And that's, it worked out well. But I mean,
Yeah.
things ahead of time, or what are the results of the dramatic task? What could be it? And another thing that we do sometimes in ours is we allow for quote unquote raises, extraordinary success of you beat it by this threshold of, you get so many more, successes, you'll get an extraordinary success. You get a benefit out of it. It comes out better, and using something like that. And I have found one of the great temptations on that is to roll even when you've already got enough successes to succeed.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jody ran a dramatic task where I did exactly that in the last round, critically failed and lost the token that got a success, because I was pushing to try to get the extraordinary success and ended up failing the entire dramatic task by 1 token by doing that. So yeah, there's you set the failure conditions. You can set extraordinary conditions. You can set partial of how many people are saved or what the effect is.
But on the day, in the moment, all you really need to know is what happens if you fail, what happens if you succeed, and then how hard is it? Because that's the other thing people struggle with is, do I make this a moderate, complex? Like, what do I do? And it's literally, do you want it to be pretty easy, pretty hard, or, oh my God, bring conviction and a stack of bennies or you are going to fail. Those are your 3, right? And it's all on the day, like which one do you want it to be?
Yeah, well, and so talk a little bit about how those differ mechanically. I mean, like there is the length and the number of successes you need, right? Those so how do you tinker with that or decide between the kind of the default options?
So the defaults again kind of set a base difficulty, right? Like that first one, it's not easy, but it's doable, right? Especially with support, and the biggest lever to move is the base penalty that the person is rolling at. And if it's a multi-person, if there's a base penalty at all, oh man, like it's going to be monstrous, right? Single person, you need to have a penalty because the group will be supporting generally. Therefore, if there's not a penalty there, they're going to get their successes very fast. So like that's the biggest tweak it. And then you notice as there are 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds is the longest and hardest. And the reason why more rounds is harder is your odds of getting clubs go up, which is costing you rounds of interaction, or like, oh man, I got our guy that's really good at this got a club. He can spend a Benny and draw a new card, or we can pitch to our second best person who doesn't have a club. You've got to take the lead this round. And that's all increasing that difficulty, that's part of it.
Yeah.
So when there is a penalty for a default penalty for a scene, does that only apply to the person making the main leadership role, or is it everybody else is also at that penalty?
Only the lead takes the penalty, I think. Support does not take the penalty unless you've got a club action card, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing. Good question. Yeah, it's a very good question because it's sometimes not clear, right? But the other thing that Daryl was talking about was dramatic tasks are meant to be dramatic, not necessarily set you up to fail.
Unless it's that top one.
Well, unless you're looking for a difficult, 5 or 8 tokens in 5 rounds, you got a -3 penalty or whatever. Like, yeah, but that's doable. And the thing is, that's flexible enough to do that, especially for like supers games when you've got people who've got boosted traits all over the place and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. You need those super difficult dramatic tasks. But the idea, from a GM standpoint, is that you want them to spend their bennies on it. Not necessarily fail, but you want them to be spending bennies to do this because you want it to be dramatic. You want them to feel like, oh my gosh, this is really hard and scary, and maybe even feel like they can't do it, even though you, the GM, the Savage Worlds expert who knows that somebody's going to explode at some point, right? They're probably going to do it, but you want them to make it feel like this is hard, and it's a Benny suck. That's what dramatic tasks are.
Yeah, a base moderate with a -2 penalty is gonna happen at a cost, right? It's gonna happen at a cost. You can count on that. Going up a step or increasing the penalty, the cost is higher, or the odds of likelihood of failing get higher. And you can just step that up to really put the screws on. Like I say, the top level, the 5-rounder, if you at a -4, you need conviction to pull that one off.
Yep.
Or legendary characters, right? And that's cool. So just the scale is the scale, everyone. Just 1, 2, 3, that's your difficulty. Default -2, crank it up if you want it to be even harder. Crank it down if you want it to be easy. I wouldn't crank it down on a single person, though.
Nice. So the question from the chat on, I don't even know, is this advisable? Any advice on running a chase and a dramatic task at the same time? I don't think I've ever done that. I've kind of picked either one or the other, or made a chase in part of a dramatic task, but not actually run down the chase rules. So
you can combine, right? But here is your thing, right? Like when I combine, it's very purposeful in terms of both of them have to be a little bit easier, or else you are going to fail, right? Because a dramatic task is built for the group to be involved. If the group has to do something else, they have that many fewer rolls on both things they're trying to do, which means they ain't gonna make it. Like, it's already pretty hard. Having them do something else means it's just done, right?
And supporting isn't as obvious in a chase run with you have to be within so many whatever they are the same card to actually do some of the support roles.
Yeah.
And so
if you're working on disabling the bomb, you're not running from the werewolves, so you're just gonna get caught and killed. Like, it depends on the fact. Like I said, you can do it, but just be advised when you start mixing them together, you have less focus on each. They either are easier or you're gonna die.
Yeah, it is something that can be done. But anything where you're dealing out action cards can probably be mixed in with your dramatic task. That's the key. Combat or something, things like that. That's definitely feasible. What Daryl talked about, I've seen of. They stole the truck that had the bomb in the back, and somebody's trying to defuse it while they're on the run and being chased by the people who want their bomb back.
Yeah.
So that made the dramatic task. It's essentially ending the dramatic task of defusing the bomb and making it unusable. Would end the chase too, because at that point they can just abandon the truck and leave it because they've made it, or at least that chase, then they go after you because you've got the timing mechanism they need. I don't know, but yeah, it's possible, definitely.
Yeah, and the thing to keep in mind, and this is true, mixing or not, is the thing that you have to be supremely kind of cognizant of as the GM is the pacing of what's going on, right? As you get closer to success or as you get closer to failure, you need to make sure that as you describe things, right, and as you put spotlights on different players as they interact with the different subsystems, you kind of want to make sure that you're keeping that tension up and not, okay, if we're running a chase and we've gotten so far ahead that the guys in the back working on the bomb don't really have to worry about the chase anymore, and it ceases to be dramatic to be running both at the same time, and you can say, okay, well, we can put the chase behind and just focus on the dramatic task. So it's not A plot, really exciting, B plot, we're just going through the motions.
Nice. So and this kind of leads into another really good question is, what are some strategies if the players just succeed a whole bunch right off the bat? Because I mean that we mentioned penalties, and penalties aren't really the main way that we kind of moderate dramatic tasks in Sway. It's much more about the number of tokens. So if they get a bunch of tokens, what happens if you do it?
Embrace success.
Embrace it. Let them do it.
Yeah.
Hooray! Good job.
And I saw a question earlier that asks about whether you get a token per raise. Absolutely, you do get a token per raise.
Yes.
They get all the tokens in the first round. Fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
Let them do it.
Let that player have the spotlight and shine it on them brightly and let them be the hero of the moment. Absolutely.
It's literally the same as one punch, acing your damage and one punching a villain. It's like, oh, well, that's not what I expected, but it was awesome. So enjoy it.
Because the next time they might not be so lucky, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And if they are, let them have it. Let them have it. This is Savage Worlds. That's what acing is all about.
And the other thing that you can do, right, is like we're talking about with the spotlight, right? Well, whatever they did, zoom in on it, right? Just take a little more time to describe it, right? Talk a little bit more. You can use a lot of dramatic language to really build that up and be like, oh, the sweat on their brow as they're working on it, right? And they almost drop it, because also you're not just limited to did they get a complication. You can describe, oh, they did this thing and they overcame the challenge, and that's why they're such a big damn hero in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can also create a lot of the drama and really make it memorable just by how you describe how they went completely overboard, right? Don't just be like, oh, well, they did it super well, it's done in one round, move on. You now have the time to take a little bit and focus on what that person did.
Right. Yeah. My complication is something in the ship caught on fire. Like, okay, succeeding despite that. R2, hoses it with a fire extinguisher, and everyone goes, whew, okay.
The other reason also is I just wanted to mention, like, sometimes the first round will go terrible. Second round will go terrible. Third round will go terrible. Fourth round, somebody explodes for 25 and they get all the tokens in the final round. What an amazing moment that is. And that really is what Savage Worlds is about.
I think we could all probably point to a very specific episode of the Wildcards ETU season where they ran a ritual as a dramatic task, last person, last round, and they were sitting needing, I think, 6 or 8 tokens to succeed. And you'll just have to go watch it yourself to see that amazing moment. But I've seen it in games of the same player in a 4-round dramatic task critically fail, and then pull it out of the end and roll like 5 raises and get all the tokens they cost plus like 3 more.
Yeah, I've seen it where the main task wasn't variable. You couldn't swap in another player. There was it's like piloting was like was the thing. And on the 4th, it was the 5th round of 5, and the pilot drew a club, and so there was no choice. But you either we fail or you're taking it this round. And amazingly, the dice gods blessed that roll even with the minuses. It was like, but those are, I think, even if you do fail, right? It's kind of like there's a good, you don't feel too bad if you fail after you get a club on the last roll. It's like, fate was tipped the scales against you guys. So, now there's complications. But a good comment from Mongo in the chat, and I think it's worth talking about more because I think this is a little more player focused, but the dramatic tasks, I think, are the best way of handling a situation where everybody in a diverse cast of characters, whether it's like a crew on a spaceship, for instance, can contribute to the success or failure of what's going on in that moment, even if there's a lead and that it's got to be the piloting role or whatever. I think that's one of the major faults in game mastering otherwise is having situations where you don't have something for the face character to do, or the courtesan character, or whatever it is, the character that the dramatic tasks are, I think, unique in that you give the players a chance on how do you want to work yourself into the scene, and so they can everybody potentially can play a part. So
right, but so here's the other piece of this, right? That's easy to shuffle around and ignore, but there's more than one way to skin any of these cats, right? Like, oh, this does sound like a good way for the crew to do that. However, in a chase, it's exactly the same, right? The crew is using the shooters holding them off, the engineer is using repair to boost the engines. Those are all assisting the pilot in his role to escape. It's exactly the same thing. And part of our thing with setting this up was we wanted our example to be a multi-person dramatic task, because people have questions about how to set the tokens and all that. And like, we've got all these examples, and every single one of them, it's like, well, that could be a single person just as easily, right? There's no wrong choice, right? It's however you do it on the day, and it's okay. Like, pick one and go with it, and it's gonna pretty much work, right?
So let's see. Any other comments before we get into a good example and run one?
Let's do an example.
Yeah, well, let's look at Cryptrite's question, the variable scene penalty, right?
Oh yeah.
My thought is be very, 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 very careful. I wouldn't do it.
Right.
I wouldn't do it, but I'll let Clint. Clint might have a different answer, but I'd say I wouldn't do it, because part of the thing is you want to set it up all up front, so people understand what they're doing and what to expect, and you don't throw it like, oh, well, you get an extra -4 penalty at the last minute, and I didn't tell you about it beforehand. Now I've spent all my bennies and I don't know.
This example has an interesting twist on that to some extent, and you'll see when we get into it. But one of the things I do is I don't do the variable penalty kind of thing, if at all possible. I will, on some occasions, set a penalty that can be removed if one player wants to step out and do something else, as opposed to, being a primary in the dramatic task. So I will do that on occasion, to where, okay, this is going to be your penalty throughout, unless somebody wants to, step out and do something else to make that penalty go away. And basically, each success and raise will remove that a point of that penalty until it's gone, and then they can come back or do whatever. And those of you who know how much penalties can affect rolls can realize how important that can be as a decision. Now, one other aspect of dramatic task before we go into an example is use of your bennies, because we've talked about, if you are a primary and you can roll, re-rolling is great, but spending a benny to redraw a card when you have a club, because sometimes it doesn't make a difference of, do I go first or do I go last? It's more a question of, if I fail at this, am I going to cause the entire thing to fail? So you may want to save bennies for that, as opposed to rerolls. But that's something you have to decide. Yeah.
I think the change to critical failures also makes increasing penalties very dangerous, because extending the number of rounds of a dramatic task is also fishing for crit fails, right? Make more rolls mean more chance for a crit fail. So if you do pile on a growing penalty, just realizing that next round, no matter what, there is also a greater chance that you're not going to survive being crit fail free. And so maybe that's a good early one. If an early crit fail on a round is like, hey, your character has a penalty from now on their rolls. But for the actual scene itself, that's pretty harsh.
Yeah. And I will say the easiest way to adjust the difficulty is just require more tokens. First and foremost, when we talk about doing it in the book, we say, imagine each player averages 1 success per round if you're doing character ones, and that's fair. But a dramatic task doesn't have to be fair. It can be more challenging. That could be the thing of, yeah, you can use any skill in this, and I know you've got some really good skills, so it's going to require more tokens to succeed. Right. In this, because it's not fair sometimes, and it can be hard.
So on that point, I'll really quick. If I'm pre-preparing a dramatic task, I'll go look at what skills are on my players' sheets, right? Because I know my players, especially if this is a campaign and not like a convention game or whatnot. I'll be like, okay, if I tell them this is the scenario, these are the types of things that they're going to try and do, and I'm like, okay, they'll probably get a raise on this, they probably won't get a raise on that, and I'll ignore the advice in the book because I know exactly what I'm doing.
Because you're that guy.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I listen. I'm always the first to say if the rule in the book doesn't get you there, use a different rule. And I will just say, okay, I think this is how many tokens my players are going to naturally generate, right? If things go kind of how I expect, and it's also having a finger on the pulse of what the caliber of the players, I guess. Let me put it this way: if you've got Jody, just knock a few off because there's going to be a bunch of failures, right? Or like my wife Molly, same thing. Can't roll to save their life. And then
literally,
yeah.
We gave you the chance.
Mm-hmm. And feel free to do that as well because I'll do that all the time. You're like, if everybody does about what I expect, let me add 2 more tokens and they'll sweat a little bit. Or I really am not super keen on the failure for this. I know it's got to be there, but I'd rather them not. Let me take away 2 tokens and make it a little bit easier.
If we're going to do an example, we got 7 minutes to do it. So we should
Awesome.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Why don't y'all pick out some pre-gens from the one Don has available? Don't choose who you want to play, and I will explain the scenario we're going to run. Okay. So, guys, we want to show you something you can do when you're getting creative with, dramatic tests, so to speak. And we're actually going to use some things we've talked about in here and have been brought up, where, in this case, our characters are at a grand opening of a museum, of a new exhibit at the museum, 3 floors. Lots of people have shown up for this in this small town. Let's say I've got 4 players, and there's going to be a fire, and they're going to have to rescue people. Now, to make this fair, let's make this since we don't have a 3-round dramatic task. 4 players would normally be 12. So, yeah, this isn't going to be fair. We're going to say there's 18 people they have to save in this fire.
Exactly. I was going to say making it fair is a mistake.
This is not it. And this is really not going to be fair because the fire, in this case, these are horror archetypes. The fire in this case came because somebody on the first floor below them knocked over a vase that was actually holding 4 fire elementals that were bound within it that have escaped. So this will be a combination combat and dramatic task. Now here's the kind of the tricky part here. The players can choose which one they want to do. If they want to do combat or actually aid in the dramatic task. All of them could aid if they wanted to. But these fire elementals, if no one fights them, their rolls will reduce the number of tokens as they go around going after people. Now, one person can choose to fight all of them if they wish, but then that person's facing 4 attacks. So the more they divide it up, the better it might be. Now, I'm not going to necessarily make it too much harder for this. It already is, because they do have an advantage here of if they have a club, they could choose to fight as opposed to aid in the dramatic task, which gives them an option there. So, Don,
deal me. I want to blast something with my atomic battle pad.
Yeah.
I get mine bullets.
Oh, I have a club. Lovely.
And you all do start with your 3 bennies. Actually, these are the Pine Box Middle School ones?
No.
No,
horror.
these are the horror companions.
These are
horror
horror
companions.
ones, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot easier when you just have these bennies at the table and Donald doesn't have to do it on the fly.
All from scratch on the fly.
I know they have them. You know they have them.
Why are you not?
Whatever. Who's first?
Okay. Don, I need you to deal out an extra card for our fire elementals
All right, I gotta.
because I want to
King
make your
clubs.
life hard.
It looks
So
like fire
they're gonna
elementals
go
are first.
first.
Yep. Does anybody want to spend a penny on a new card?
Hell no.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, they're going to get to go first. So they have a D8 in fighting. So there are 4 of them rolling 4D8.
So 1, 2, 5, and 3.
Well, that cost you 1 token. So since you haven't acted yet, that now makes 19 tokens to succeed.
See, this task is getting easier all the time.
That's right.
Where are these on? Why can't I select them? All right. Okay.
Wow. So fire elementals come out of this container. 3 of them are very confused by being released after so many hundreds of years in the modern world.
Hey,
And, of
Psychic,
course-
weren't you supposed to predict something like this? Come on.
All right. So, Tracy,
So I have a club. So I am not going to directly participate in helping with the fire. I am going to attack one of the fire elementals, though. And it looks like I have some kind of a gun. So I'll try to use that. Whether it's going to work or not, I'll try it anyway. So then I would roll shooting, I suppose.
sure.
So, Don, are you rolling it, or do I need to roll dice? here?
However people want to do it. I can roll everything. If
Let me
if
roll.
people-
I'll roll dice here. I have them. So I missed, and
Now,
I'm gonna bend
Tracy, so
Yes?
you know, these fire elementals are brought to you courtesy of our fantasy companion on page 195, and they are large, so you get a +2 to your attack rolls
Oh,
against them.
+2. All right. Well, then I
Yes.
didn't miss. So I know that I might just sail right through them, but I got a 5 on my to hit then.
Okay, that hits.
So what would you say? Is that a shotgun I'm holding?
Yeah, 3d6.
Yeah.
Blam.
They have a toughness of 9, so
Okay.
but they
Ooh.
are extras.
So I rolled a
Oh.
20 damage on 3d6.
Boom.
Okay.
Boom.
2 wounds. That. We're down to 3 fire elementals now. Because
You're welcome, everybody.
the the fire elementals are immune to fire, not shotgun.
Okay. Good.
Nice.
All right. So next up would be with the 7 of spades, Landauer playing the psychic.
So it looks like she's got a very good notice. I think it's a D8.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask Clint. Clint, Psychic Shelly, she wants to hurt the fire elementals with water or with a fire extinguisher. Is there a fire suppression system in the school or a fire extinguisher nearby? And to me, it's a notice. Like she's trying to look to see what in her environment she could use. Is that an attack or is that part of the state of people?
I would say that absolutely would work in this instance, because there are fire suppression systems here. You can try to back them. This is going to be kind of a one-time thing. Well, you could fire a fire extinguisher or something, but more to the point, it may not affect the fire elementals so much because you're not attacking them directly, but it will enable it for people to potentially escape the building,
Okay.
safely. If you do that. So just make a notice roll and see.
That's a 7.
7. So you have 1 token. Are you happy with that? Or would you like
I'm going
to
to spend a penny to re-roll and see if I can't get a raise.
Okay.
Oh, double explosion. Double explosion.
I say
That
double
was worth it.
ones. Someone else dies.
So, an 8 versus 8, 9, 11. 11. That's worth 2, right? Okay, good.
2 tokens,
There
yeah.
you go.
Yeah. All right. So you have you've saved one of the people that was here, and apparently the random person that walked in because they saw the fire from the beginning.
Go,
Okay.
nerd.
All right,
so
done.
the
We're already
nerd
over.
is going to let's say maybe the lights are off and it makes it difficult because the fire's knocked out the lights, so he's going to use his repair to try and repair the lights to make it easier for people to escape on their own.
Okay.
And that's a 4, so that's gonna one person can figure out their own way out once the lights are back on.
Okay. I will take that. Yeah. And that brings us to Daryl.
Right, in proper Ghost Hunter style, I'm using my Atomic Ghost Pack, spraying the area. Rather than rolling in as an attack against an elemental, though, I'm just doing enough property damage that it's dousing flames, and essentially reducing the fire as the roof collapses and puts stuff out. Yeah, that's a fail, but not a crit fail. I'll go ahead and spend a penny, get
Okay.
1 success.
All right. So our Ghost Hunter effectively uses their, con pack and creates a fire break.
Ineffectively uses.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I come from a comedy. This is how this is going to go.
That's right.
And we've only probably got time for one more round, so.
Yeah.
Ugh.
All right, I'll definitely use one of these bennies. Get another. Get another. You know what?
Wow. Don.
I'm the Joker Fisher, and I'm going home empty-handed today.
No. Don't be like Don. Don't.
But so going first, I will. Let's see. I've got science. I can probably there's probably some stuff around that I could like knock together and to make like a fire retardant material all of a sudden, right? Like the you always see in those science classes, they put the one thing into the other and then it's just a whole bunch of foam. Try and block the fire elemental's access just with this massive foam.
Okay, so yeah, I'll put out there that there is a display in the museum of like a chemistry kit that belonged to someone very famous,
right,
and you're
we're in a
going to
museum.
destroy it to do this. It's like, oh look, here's some old
Absolutely.
chemical.
There we go. There's another person saved.
That's right. And one artifact, historical artifact, lost forever.
Who cares? Then
All
we'll go
right.
over to the fire elementals.
It goes to the fire elementals. Okay. Let's roll a 3d8 for them. Don? You know what? I, as the GM, have 2 bennies, so let's re-roll that 1 and that 2.
Uh-oh.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
So
Oh,
that's
no.
a 6, a 14, and a 6.
Oh, no.
Okay, so there's
It's really
3,
time
2
for those fire
that's
suppression.
that's the 5 successes you guys had gotten now lost.
Oh, no.
Okay,
Oh, no. That's
maybe I
bad.
made this too unfair, but
Fairness is not the point, everyone.
fairness is not the point.
People gonna die.
Right?
Yeah,
If you learn nothing else from these, everyone, learn that.
that's right.
Fairness is not the objective.
All right,
Entertainment is.
Chris, you're next.
So I'm gonna use my mind bullets to get people to exit themselves out of the scene, save themselves, stop being lollygaggers and watching us fight the fire elementals. So mind bullets. I assume that's my power under the psionics.
Yes, D8.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's really good. Oh, that's not okay. So it's 17 mind bullets.
So that's 4.
4. Okay, you have apparently lobotomized 4 people, but saved their lives.
Right. Oh,
Nice done. Yes. Yeah, nicely rolled.
All right, that then sends it over to Tracy.
Yep, Tracy.
Okay, so I've decided this is my role, and fire elementals killing 4 or more or 5 more people not good. So I'm going to multi-action and try to get 2 of them this time, especially since they're large and I got a +2 to hit anyway. So that'll offset my multi-action penalty.
Bold.
I know, right?
The way we like it.
So first one is going to be a 5 to hit. So I think that'll hit.
Okay.
And then the second one is going to miss, but I'm going to spend a Benny Don. And I got another 5 to hit.
Okay.
So damage on the first is 11. And I think I'll go for the same dude because the toughness is 9, right?
That is.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm going to spend a Benny on that too, Don. Oh, okay. That's going to be 21 damage.
It's a whole lot of gone. Okay.
All right. Well, it turns out I looked up my character card and I'm famous. So I'm going to use that, right? I'm gonna stand up there and go, it's okay, everyone. Move orderly out the building. Da-da-da-da-da. I'm going to use my persuasion. I get a +1 for my fame. Oh, that's an explosion. With the +1, that's going to save 2 more people. You know what? I'm going to spend a Benny. See if I can get even better. Oh! Yes, that would be 20. So up to 5 more people saved. Because I'm famous. And I'm selfieing with my video camera as I do this.
If
So
only there
Daryl
were more
gets-
people alive.
Yeah, Daryl.
Right?
Daryl saves 5 lives by saying, "Follow me, and I'll take selfies with all of you."
do we really want to
What you
save
got,
the
people?
Instagram generation? Come on now.
All right. Well, and
That's it. Yeah.
That's all of them that made it out. Yep.
So
Still
people
have-
died.
2 fire elementals in there that will eventually, due to somebody's foresight, be fizzled out by the fire suppression system.
And the funny thing is, right, all 5 of us, if set to make this encounter, would have probably done it in a different way, and none of those ways are incorrect, right? Like, that's just,
Well, except Chris's.
or Don, apparently.
Or no, okay. We're all going to disagree. That's just but it's they're all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're out of time anyway. So
Yeah,
awesome.
good.
Folks, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching our Getting Creative. We'll do more of these. We definitely have to get Mike in because Mike promised he was going to write one of these. So we might do dramatic tasks again. See what's in Mike's brain. But if not, we will.
Penance.
I'll have you know, I lost power last night, and all my clocks were wrong. I was here.
So yeah, check out the Kickstarter. We got another awesome stretch goal, making the player's box even more awesome. But other than that, enjoy your Friday, folks. We appreciate you tuning in, and thanks for everybody who are showing up. And get out there and play some Savage Worlds. I get to play some Necessary Evil tonight, which is awesome. I think I told you about my cell phone character. That's been adopted by another new player who's playing the Nokia brick phone who can do machine manipulation. And I get to play Valentine, who's a saucy little bow and arrow user after St. Valentine, who's got a butt window instead of a boob window. So it's fantastic. Anyways, I'll show art next time on one of these streams. It's great.
Oh, please don't.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, folks, get out there, play some Savage Worlds. If you're coming to meet us in is it October, September for Gamehole Con? This weekend is when they open up game signups. So Tracy's going to be there, and Daryl's going to be there, and Donald's going to be there, and Cliff's going to be there. And maybe I'll be. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll be there yet, but for all the folks who are want to come, game signups at Gamehole Con. So So just go to GameholeCon, probably gamehole.com, I think, whatever it is. Use Google, find it, sign up for our games. Those are going to be opening up very soon. And I think there's almost 100 games, like 93 games on the schedule of Savage Worlds, which is awesome. And so, yeah, come join us, come sign up for games, and we will see you guys probably bright and early next week for some more chat. So appreciate everybody. Take it easy and enjoy some Savage Worlds this weekend.